Shooting with filters for landscape photography is often a daunting task for people who are just starting out. However, once you start getting a hang of it, once you start getting comfortable with shooting with filters, and even just the process of using them and stacking them and installing them and everything, you will realize that filters enable you as a photographer to do so much more than what you see with your eyes while you are on location. By merely limiting or filtering the entry of light, there are so many possibilities unlocked when it comes to the visual effects achieved in your photos. However, even if you already know how to use filters, there are some mistakes that you might want to be careful of just to make sure that you're getting the best image quality possible. In this video, let's talk about 4 common mistakes when using filters for landscape photography. Now, the first one is simple and obvious, but it is something that I do have to point out because this is something that I also committed so many times when I was starting out. And it is simply unnecessarily using ND filters. To be more specific, that is unnecessarily doing long exposures when it has nothing to add to your photos. At least in terms of landscape photography, we only really use ND filters to prolong our exposures during the day. At night, it is almost 100% unnecessary to use ND filters, obviously because you don't have to limit the light since there is already scarcity of it. We do long exposures at night often because it is dark and we want more light to be able to come in, so we extend our exposure time. However, during the day, we only really need to do long exposures when it has something to add to our photos. Getting bright enough exposure shouldn't be your concern during the day because of course there is an abundance of light, even if you are using apertures such as f11 or even f16 because you're dealing with the sun. So the only reason for you to be using ND filters and doing long exposures during the day is if you are going to somewhat harness the potential that is given to you by something moving in the frame. So the first thing that you have to do is always consider what is moving in the frame and what effect will it have if, for example, it starts moving or creates a path within my photo. If that visual element is moving, then you have to consider how fast it is going and to what direction it is going. Now, if in case there is nothing moving that will be beneficial to your frame, then of course you don't need to be doing long exposures. When I was starting out, I would automatically set up my tripod, set up my filters, and just do long exposures just because I know how to. And ultimately, that just led to me wasting time and effort mounting the filters, and of course, figuring out the exposure. So it might not really lead to bad images for you, but it might lead to you missing some shots that you could have taken in the 30 seconds or 1 minute that you wasted doing long exposures with no added benefit. Now, the next mistake that you want to avoid is simply skipping a slot on your filter holder. Of course, if you're using circular filters and you're stacking them, then automatically you're not really skipping a slot. However, if you're using a filter holder, then that means you have more slots to choose from, and you might think that you can just leave a slot for more space. However, that could be detrimental to the image quality. You want to avoid having too much space between glass layers, specifically when you are shooting with the sun in frame or with a strong light source in frame. Why is that? It's simply because you want to avoid having flares. Flares result as a result of light bouncing between layers of glass. And the more space there is between those layers, the more pronounced the flare will be. And take note, this also means that the front element of your lens is considered as one layer. So you don't want to be using a filter holder that has too much space between the first layer and your lens. If you haven't gotten your own filter holder or you're considering switching to another system, you might want to check if there is way too much space between the first layer of the filter and the front elements of your lens when the filter holder is mounted. If you already have a filter holder, then just make sure that every slot closest to the front element of your lens will be occupied and there will be no space in between. Now, there is no guarantee that there will be no flare, but this will definitely reduce the chances if possible. Now, here's the thing. There are filter holders where there is a specific slot for circular polarizers in between the first layer or the first layer for square filters and your lens. Now, my suggestion is just always keep the CPL in there because you can always just turn it to the other side anyway, just so you can avoid having that extra space. Now, why I do have your attention, let me invite you to join this filter giveaway that I am hosting with HNY. So this is actually a photo contest and a giveaway all in one. For the giveaway, all you have to do is go to my Instagram and look for the poster and follow the mechanics there. All you really need to do to have raffle entries is to tag or mention some friends that you would like to invite to join the contest or the giveaway. One winner will be chosen via raffle, and the winner will get their very own HNY Revo Ring VND plus CPL filter. Now for the contest, there will be 3 categories. Of course, the first one will be landscape and outdoor photography. All you have to do is follow the mechanics on the posters, and the winner will of course win an entire landscape filter kit with the HNY Revo Ring Swift system. If you're not familiar, the Revo Ring Swift filter system is a magnetic modular filter system that allows you to change up your filters and everything you attach onto it very swiftly. This will later on allow you to tailor fit the different filter formats, filter sizes, and the other attachment that you might want to use so that everything you put onto your filter system is exactly what you need. Another category is the portrait category, wherein you will submit your best portraits and you can win an HNY VND plus CPL Revo Ring, plus of course some additional clip-on filters such as a Pro Mist filter. And lastly, the HNY Revo Ring Swift filter system is not just for photographers. There are also filmmaker kits out there. So the next category is for filmmakers. All you have to do is post a reel video on Instagram and follow the mechanics, and you can win the HNY Revo Ring Swift Filmmaker Kit. Now, this giveaway and contest is limited to photographers and filmmakers in the Philippines. However, if you're from another country, do give them a follow anyway, and just maybe they will see the need to have their giveaway in your country as well. Entry submissions will be accepted until May 31st, so join now. The next mistake you want to avoid is basically neglecting your circular polarizer. As I already said, with this kind of filter holder, you can always just keep the circular polarizer in there because you can always just turn the polarizer and it's not going to be a problem if you don't need the polarizer. Of course, if you're already an experienced landscape photographer, then you would know that polarizers come in very handy whenever we are shooting with bodies of water and we want to manipulate or enhance the reflections in the water for added symmetry. At the same time, this can also be very helpful when you're shooting with a blue sky because using a polarizer can help you intensify that blue sky and increase the contrast. However, if you understand how circular polarizers work, then you would know that there is actually a more universal use or a more universal benefit when it comes to using circular polarizers, and it still comes from the fact that it deals with reflections. This benefit is actually the fact that there are many micro reflections in the frame when you are shooting out in nature. This can be either from moisture on the surface of leaves, on surface of grass, or anything with vegetation. And at the same time, this could be from reflections from moisture on the surface of rocks. By being able to manipulate the reflections and minimize the glare, you can actually increase the vibrance and the detail of your photos. This scenario is commonly seen when you are shooting, for example, waterfalls where there is moisture all around and the glare might be taking away attention from the waterfalls because it's too bright. However, this is also something that I commonly use when I am shooting other things such as seascapes, for example, because even the reflections on the rocks on the beach or even the reflections on the waves can affect how bright your foreground is. By being able to control these reflections, you can have more control with the surface on your foreground, and at the same time, if you are facing the right direction, you can also intensify the sky. So that's why if you're using an older filter holder, just keep the CPL there, or if you're using something like this from HNY, then you would know that the ND filters already come with their built-in CPL so that you always have one no matter what kind of ND filter you are using. Now the last one is either omitting or overusing your graduated neutral density filter. Now you probably know that using a GND filter will let you reduce the brightness on one part of the frame while maintaining the brightness on the other side. GND filters are generally helpful because when we're shooting during the day, it is an accepted fact that the sky is always brighter than your foreground. The challenge arises when you want to show a little bit more detail in your foreground and the limitations of your camera when it comes to dynamic range cannot anymore pull up those shadows. Now, there are instances where other tricks can help you omit using a GND filter, and that is specifically when you are shooting multiple exposures and you're blending them. However, there are also instances wherein those don't apply because there might be something moving in the frame and you can only shoot one exposure. At the same time, some photographers might say that you can just use a gradient filter on Photoshop or Lightroom. Well, the thing is, if you're not able to tame the dynamic range while you are shooting, then there's only a certain extent wherein your RAW file can recover those details. For me, it's always better to use a GND if you can and if you have one, so you have a bit of allowance when it comes to details and dynamic range. However, another mistake that I commonly see is overusing a GND filter. There are instances wherein you don't need such a heavy GND filter. And to be honest, sometimes all that means is sliding your GND up or down so you're not making it way too dark. What you want to be cautious of is whenever the sky is darkened way too much to the point that the foreground is much brighter than the sky. And of course, there might be instances wherein that actually happens, specifically when you are facing a sky that is very gloomy but there is a lot of sunlight coming from behind you and that is illuminating your foreground. But then whoever is looking at your photo might not be able to see that, so it will still look unnatural. All you have to do to avoid this mistake is to always check whether you're over-darkening your sky and your foreground is getting way too bright. Of course, there will be a certain allowance that you can adjust in post, but it is always better to get it right in camera so that it will be easier to polish and easier to refine later on. And there we go. Those are 4 common mistakes when using filters for landscape photography, plus the added bonus of a giveaway that you might win. Now, if you have any questions about what I said, or there might be something you want to add to what I just said, feel free to leave them down below in the comment section. And of course, if you're new to the channel, my name is Nicco Valenzuela. I'm a landscape and architectural photographer, and this channel talks about landscape photography, architectural photography, a whole lot of gear, and a whole lot of tech. So if you're into that, then click the subscribe button and hit that notification bell. In any case, thank you for watching.